They started on the phones and then they were promoted so that they could write to customers instead without the pressure of people in the queue in the same way. But they're not very good writers. They're super smart. They have the soul of customer service. They understand the products and systems really well. They're fast, they're accurate, but they're not great writers.
Mm.
These tools can mask the lack of writing skills. And that is such a cool thing. That means that people who might have been held back because their writing skills were kind of rough or raggedy may not be. And so Gen AI tools may mean that people hold jobs. And
That's a really
I'm real excited about that.
hello. Welcome to the X Files. Today's guest is Leslie O'Flahaven. She is the principal and owner of eWrite, that is capital E dash Write, where she teaches people to write well for online readers. She has done trainings and consultations for organizations including Geico, Sally Mae, and the National Institute of Health. Over 750,000 people have taken one of her 6 LinkedIn Learning courses. Leslie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. I'm really eager to have a great conversation.
Me too. I'm really excited since I attended your session at ICMI Expo in Orlando a couple weeks back, and you really clearly covered the topic of how to write a good knowledge base article, and that's right up my alley. So I knew we had to have a conversation.
It's a great mind situation, huh?
Well, I hope so, at least on my side.
Medium
Um,
great minds.
yeah, mediocre to average,
How to undersell the
perhaps.
podcast.
Yeah, so I wanted to hear a little bit about your past and past experiences. So from when you first started your career, what is one of the first things that really surprised you about writing for customers?
I would say how much responsibility we give to the people who do it and how little support they get to do it well. That's my surprise because working in tech support or working in a contact center or working to create knowledge articles is kind of like has kind of a factory mentality. You're producing and producing and producing. If you work in marketing, yes, you're producing, but not kind of pieces per hour. We measure
Right.
this work in production per hour, or even sometimes in production per minute, this kind of thing. And I find that frontline folks are rarely helped very much to write well. They don't get
Mhm.
much support. They're expected to do it without a lot of support. And the effect of writing really well, of that email that anticipates and answers all the customers' questions, or that internal, employee facing knowledge base article that helps the tech support people on the phone answer questions without struggle. The value of that written piece is so high that the people who write those things rarely get much support doing it.
Absolutely. I think everybody in the audience can relate to this and understands where you're coming from. What would you say are some of the opportunities there, or what are some of the, sort of um, the direct actions that people can take, even if they don't have a big budget or even if they don't have a lot of time?
I like that question because there are several things we can do. Let's say you have a team of 10 technical support writers or something like this. If you will simply choose examples of good communication, that chat transcript where the customer was really inarticulate about what the problem was and the agent pulled out, they asked diagnostic questions so we could figure out what the problem was. If the leaders and manager will simply take examples of good communication and feed the team a steady diet of those, a 10-minute meeting every Thursday at 10 a.m. where we're going to look at one example of good communication, the people will grow. It's not that expensive. You don't have to hire me. Don't have to hire a trainer. You just say, here's an example of our team doing a good job. And let's look at it, let's discuss why this is a good example, and then get back to work. I'll see you again next Thursday with the same thing. Adults
Hmm.
especially, adults who are already doing the job especially need good examples, a steady
Mm,
diet of what to do. It's not a very effective learning practice for adults in the workplace to tell them, don't do that anymore. This is what not to do. It just doesn't help
sure.
them grow.
Absolutely. And I mean, I definitely appreciate your perspective on that. It's something that I find myself repeating across projects, across years, across companies is use positive language. Don't say don't do this, right? I'm bad example here myself. Instead, say please do something like this or we should go in this direction as opposed to we can't do that or we shouldn't do this. And it's always going to give people a more clear action to take.
Totally, yes. And most managers do know they can find an example of effective communication, one per week. So do
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so writing is, clearly this valuable thing. Is there like a particularly, you know, ridiculous or kind of unbelievable example of like bad writing and maybe how you solved that?
Yes, there are lots of them. How many hours do we have? I'll give one example that's around knowledge management. And anytime I give a bad example, like I'm about to give to you, I do it with all the love in my heart because, as my core belief is we can do better. We can write better to customers. I know we can. I can help you. So when I give a bad example like this, it's not to mock or to harm. It's just, I don't know, just to see how we can stretch and grow. So knowledge folks who are building and maintaining knowledge bases, they sometimes get this out of my cold dead hands mentality where they're going to save every single knowledge article that has ever been created, even after it's long past its use. And this
Mm,
is true for customer service organizations also. They will save email templates, chat templates long after they've served any need. And this happened to me once when I was working with a large international airline. This was 2019. And I did a project where we assessed how many of their email templates was the team actually using. They had a library of, I don't know, 600 email templates, something like this, common, large number, common, large number. And of course, in my experience, most organizations are using 10% of their templates 90% of the time, right?
mhm.
Those estimates are sound. I have repeatedly seen that that's the right number. So that means that 90% of the templates are not being used very often at all. So what the one that I was like, give me the Excedrin right now, was they had a template about why explaining why air traffic had been interrupted when the unpronounceable volcano in Greenland erupted. And this was at
Oh
that
yeah, I
time, I think
remember
it was
that.
about 7 years ago. 7 years ago. It was like,
Hmm.
you don't need that template. They said, we absolutely do need this template. I said, no, you can delete that template. But then they said, but what if the volcano erupts again? And I was like, well, we'll write a fresh template at that time. And the chance, it was like millennia between eruptions of that volcano. You don't need humanity will be dead when the volcano erupts again. So that's a pretty hilarious mistake in my opinion, holding on to this with a death grip when you're not going to need it. And if you do need to write about a volcanic eruption, it'll be a different volcano, believe me.
Definitely. That's funny, and it reminds me. I've done a little bit of software development and programming work, and there's a principle called "you aren't gonna need it," which is exactly the same
It's
as what
my
you're
life
saying,
story.
basically. And so the idea is like don't be too precious about the things that you write. Don't be too precious about holding on to things. Don't plan too much for the future because you aren't going to need it.
Need it, right. And I'll adapt that. Like, you don't need that. You don't. And, all teasing aside, sometimes I think about every knowledge article as having some number of ounces or pounds of weight. And when you
Mm.
have 600 of them,
Hmm.
and 540 of them are not really contributing very much, that's a lot of weight to carry. That's a
Right.
lot of weight to carry. And, if the search isn't basically magical, no one can
Hmm.
find anything. And then what
Right.
they do? They do the thing that people do to survive, and that's they start to store them locally, like on a post-it or something. And
Yeah,
then,
they've bookmarked their favorites or
right,
something,
right, or
right?
they store them on their own hard drive, and oh, it's just not good. It's not good.
Yeah, I think that there's a real difficulty with prioritization. How do you think about like prioritizing? Let's say you have this knowledge base of 600 articles. You've got your team of 10 people that spend time in it and update it. How do you prioritize which things get attention and which things get deleted or hopefully deleted?
Well, I think you look at the what's getting used first.
Mm.
Now that's
Right.
that's kind of a very that's the same as putting when your kid says I don't feel well and you put your hand on the kid's forehead, say, do you have a fever? Do I have to take the day off of work tomorrow? So how many of them are getting used is a blunt measure of their
Sure.
value, but it is a useful measure of their value. And then I think you next look at whether whether any of the articles is actually doing harm. So, are
Mm.
any incoming contacts being caused by some problem with one or more of the articles? It's just too stinking long, or the screenshots and the numbered steps don't match in some way, or the explanation is too technical for the people who need to use it, or too simple, too generalist for the people who need to use it. So, first, I would look at what's being used most often. Then I would look at what is causing problems, if there are any contacts caused by inadequate knowledge. And then I would ask myself, could we just sunset all the rest of this? How much of this could we cut loose? Like the astronauts just let the debris float away in space. Because there is it's taxing to have all of that bloat that you just don't need. So if you're going to cut loose a lot of articles, so thinking of that 600 article knowledge base, you're going to archive 300 of them, right? 300
Mhm.
of them. You need someone or several people who can revive them quickly if they're needed. So that's actually a kind of a staffing choice. Now you need to designate someone who is a good writer, who's a nimble and a quick writer, and say, I will take you out of the queue. If we need some articles refreshed, you're the person.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a really strong point of like picking up on the interest and ability within the team and saying, "Hey, you clearly have a knack for this. We're going to set aside some of your time and maybe make this one of your performance metrics. We're going to measure you on even, right? Say you're the writer or you're the writer for a given topic even, right? Depending on the size of the team. I know a lot of people have limited resources, but if you have let's say Bob who just loves printers, then like have Bob write all the printer articles, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we want Bob to love people and
Mm,
we want Bob to be the person who loves people and wants to help them use their printers. But that's, I think, really the important thing is the
sure.
person with the belief that it is a service job and our service is to help our customers
Hmm.
complete their tasks. And I know how to write knowledge articles about printers that will help our customers, troubleshoot problems or fix them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that um, with the rise of this consumer preference really for self-service, people are reading these articles more than ever. They're finding them through Google, they're finding them increasingly through AI and ChatGPT and so on. And if you have somebody who is thoughtful and service oriented and thinking about the customer, the human at the end of the road, or the human on the other side of the screen, rather, a simple turn of phrase or a simple word choice in the right direction might echo, 1,000 times, right? It might be seen again and again and again.
Yeah.
And, how do you think about like this, like kind of quantifying this? Because while what we're talking about feels good, I mean, it's often the feel good stuff that gets kind of, deprioritized or forgotten in business.
Well, we can quantify pain better than we can quantify relief of pain, right?
Mm,
So I would start by saying, we're getting X number of questions about this topic, and they're taking X amount of time to answer, and that has a dollar value, and we can count that. And then this is really sad, but kind of funny. It's like help with writing is one of the least expensive things you can buy. I wish it weren't
mm,
true, but you can you can hire a human writer at such a relatively low cost to solve those problems. So let's say you have a tier 3 engineer who's repeatedly having to answer a question that the knowledge content could be answering. You could hire someone who costs one third of a tier 3 engineer to write the article. And now with AI, you can prompt a tool that has, a dollar, less than dollars and only cents costs per use to
right.
help fix an article. But you need a human who is the customer's advocate to explain to the AI tool how the article needs to be fixed. That you still
Absolutely.
need that human to intervene.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And that's a nice segue back to the session topic, which, you spoke about how to prompt AI to write better articles or to improve existing articles. Can you share a little bit? I don't want you to like recap your session and, give it away for free here, but like what were some highlights or what are some things that you think people could benefit from on that topic?
Well, when I think about common problems with knowledge articles, for example, we really can use AI tools, Gemini, GPT, et cetera, to fix some of the more common problems. And one I mentioned in passing earlier, but there's 6 steps to a process, and the article shows 3 bullets and 2 numbers. You can
Hmm.
prompt the tool, make the steps, number all the steps in sequence.
Hmm.
That's a good prompt. Or the article is really long, and how long is too long? Well, if it's twice as long as the average length of the other articles, and you're kind of wondering, why? And you can ask the tool, give me a version of this article, this 1,000 word article that's 750 words. And then the human has to judge, is this okay? Is the 750 word article okay? Or sometimes the articles, so the steps are confusing. Fix, AI can help.
Hmm.
The piece is too long. AI can help. The article lacks a summary at the beginning of what the outcome is going to be of following the instructions. AI is great at that. Great. So you could say, take this article and write a 50-word summary at the beginning so a user can tell, hey, did I pull up the right thing? Is this actually the article that I need? You know, or it's sloppy. I'm
Mm.
an English teacher in my core, so I'm not here for those common mistakes. So you can tell the tool, fix the spelling, punctuation, and grammar,
Hmm.
and it'll do a great job at that kind of thing. Or the tool, Gen AI tool is pretty good if you ask it to rewrite the article for a different user. So let's say in a previous instance you had to have certain credentials to use this software, to even create an account. But now you don't have to have those credentials, and more people are going to be creating accounts. So you could tell the tool, the Gen AI tool, rewrite this article so users who have never created an account will understand how to do it. Those are
Mm.
some ways that Gen AI really can help with common writing problems with articles.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think changing the perspective of the article, changing the audience is really a powerful thing as well, because if you're not familiar with this process already, I think the tendency is to write it sort of for yourself, for your own level of understanding, right? So being able to kind of reframe it as like, write this for a beginner, that's a really powerful one.
Yes, or write it for someone who's not, we have a version for beginners, but we need this for, somebody who's a sophisticated user.
Hmm.
This is this willingness to rewrite knowledge content so it's useful and attuned to the user. This is a trait that separates people who provide great support from people who provide okay, not so great support. And
Hmm.
that's if we look at our most impressive team members in technical support, in customer care, they're the ones who need very little and kind of subtle clues about how sophisticated the user is, and then they switch their behavior. They switch the way they explain things. They switch how quickly they talk. It seems almost like magic, but it is a skill, and we need to do the same thing in representing knowledge different ways for different people.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that I think is on a lot of people's mind is the idea of like AI is taking all the jobs. And obviously, as we've just been talking about, like AI can do writing, but it's my belief that the the lower end of the spectrum is increasingly being picked up by AI. I don't think that's controversial. But as you go up the spectrum of difficulty and complexity and technical writing and sort of understanding the context of the entire knowledge base in the company, it puts more pressure and there's more need for experts like yourself. How do you think about this kind of transition and the new need or lack of need for writing skill?
When you said lower end of the spectrum, did you mean the simplest incoming questions? Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just very simple
Hmm.
needs, very simple kind of writing, and also just a small scope of writing, right? Like writing a handful of articles as opposed to, 300 or something.
Well, on the first topic, I think AI will mean fewer people are needed to write to customers or to users. I think that's obvious. That's going to happen. Um, I'm not sure that AI is only for those somewhat simple requests or questions. I'm not sure that that's the only or the best use of the tools. I think we just need to stop using bad, crappy bot communication to just frustrate and harass customers. That's Wait, let me get my soapbox because I see a lot of automated communication. It's just so bad. It's just so customer hating.
It's
What
blatant.
it's just awful. And what I think is that the companies are expecting customers to develop kind of a service callus where they
Mm,
can endure this crap and they won't bail out of the question. You and I, everyone in our field holds these horror stories, about how ridiculously frustrating it was. Like I got caught in a customer service vortex trying to sign my granddaughter up for gymnastics class, and the bot couldn't tell me whether the class we wanted was offered on Saturday, but it would not leave me alone. It was like stalking me into my house, like if you can't tell me whether the class is available on Saturday, leave me alone. So I used Facebook Messenger and the same bot was not answering the questions over on Facebook
oh, wow.
Messenger. And then somehow they started texting me and it's just brutally inconclusive.
Mm,
So if customers have do develop calluses, one of the calluses we all have is that we will stay on hold on the phone when we are in dire need of help. But there are
right.
costs to kind of chafing customers like that. By the time the company does get to help you on the phone, you're really ragey. And I think that poor quality, unhelpful AI communication is something that that's chafing us now.
Yeah.
And I hate to see that happening. And I hope that we can use these AI tools to support human writers who will advocate for a good customer experience because they care about customers. I'm afraid that's not going to be the case. So if we lose jobs and are just out there chapping our customers, that's bad.
Absolutely. Yeah. I appreciate your perspective on that very much. I think that there's a lot of people, excuse me. I think there's a lot of people that are chapped, that are chafing, that are, they're almost like keyed up before they even contact support or even try to do self-service. And they know in the back of their mind, like, oh, it was terrible last time at this other company. It's going to be terrible again. And so the expectations are kind of at an all-time low, I think. And it's an opportunity to do it well, of course, and delight people, surprise them. But I want to go back to one thing that I said before. I'd love to get your thought on this, but I think because AI is automating some part of this total spectrum of writing work. You know, what do you think about the increased demand or increased need for like a more expertise to kind of orchestrate the AI, to guide the use of AI to ensure that it's operating correctly?
Absolutely. I think all of us who are using AI tools to write anything uh, are feeling that great relief that production of the writing is so much easier. You know, whether
Hmm.
it's a best man speech or a eulogy, God forbid, we it's so much easier to make the thing because the AI tool is making the thing. This is wonderful. Like if I never have to write a performance review again, it would be a beautiful world to live in. Production is really, really easy. But one thing hasn't changed. A good writer is always the reader's advocate and champion.
Hmm.
And a good writer always knows what the reader needs and will do the work to make sure the reader gets what they need. So the written product is of value. And we are not free of that responsibility when AI makes the product for it. We're not free. So what we need now, the writing skill we need now is the ability to review what AI has made, name the deficits, and ask AI to fix those deficits. So, for example, we're like, hey, Gemini, second paragraph is wrong. That's one kind of problem we have with AI writing. AI, what you wrote was wrong. So fix that. That's one way we protect the reader and we're their advocate. We don't let them see wrong stuff. But the other might be, this knowledge article you wrote about why version 16.2 of our software is better than 16.1 is cheesy, right? So we can tell it's cheesy, but you have to tell the tool how to fix cheese.
Right.
So what are you going to tell it? If it, believe me, Ben, most people I work with in my classes run out of the ability to explain what's wrong with the writing. They can
Mm.
tell something's wrong, but it's really hard. That's my field. It's really hard for them to explain what's wrong. And they'll often say, this isn't quite right, but I can't tell what's wrong with it. But you have to be able to tell because you got to tell the tool to fix it, or you can fix it. But somebody's got, if you're that reader's advocate, I want new users of this system to be able to create an account and log in easily. And I don't want them to call me and ask for help with that. So you have to be able to tell the tool how to fix what it made. Whether the tool is wrong, too long, too sophisticated, too cheesy, whatever it is, you have to be able to figure it out and tell it how to fix it.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you can't get away from the need to have some level of expertise. And as you have repeated for good reason, is being the advocate of the customer as well, putting yourself in their shoes. I want to ask you, have there been any interesting stories or interesting cases with customers you've been working with or clients you've been working with recently where you sort of saw the they felt the benefit of using these AI tools, or you had an interesting case with using these AI tools recently.
Yes, I'm going to talk about an interesting person, and or two people really. We talk about how AI tools may cost customer service writers their jobs, customer service reps their jobs. This is real. It is real. But I want to speak the quiet part out loud here. Lots of people who work in frontline roles in customer service or in technical support aren't very good writers. They may have less higher education than other employees. They may have not been to college at all. They didn't finish. They didn't like it when they were there. And many people who work in these roles start out on the phones, and this whole phone to written channel flow, that's another topic for another podcast, but it is real. They started on the phones, and then they were promoted so that they could write to customers instead without the pressure of people in the queue in the same way. But they're not very good writers. They're super smart. They have the soul of customer service. They understand the products and systems really well. They're fast, they're accurate, but they're not great writers.
Mm.
These tools can mask the lack of writing skills. And that is such a cool thing. That means that people who might have been held back because their writing skills were kind of rough or raggedy may not be. And so Gen AI tools may mean that people hold jobs. And
That's a really
I'm real excited about that.
That's a great point, and I really appreciate your insight there. I think because these people are experts in the customer experience. They're experts in the product, but maybe they just don't have the writing skill. They've
Right.
got all the ideas. It's all the source material is there. And then you just, feed it in and let the Gen AI grammar expert, handle
Yeah,
it.
let them fix the communication, let them smooth it out. And when people are hired to do a job on the phone and then they're moved to email or whatever other written channel chat, I see some a lifelong writing teacher and as a professional who understands how writers develop, I see something all the time, and that is people who want to talk to customers on the phone or who are willing to do it as a job like to talk and listen. Duh.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
saying baseball pitchers have strong arms. Duh, right? So people who want to talk on the phone like to talk and listen. They like talking and listening more than they like reading and writing.
Yeah, that
Why?
definitely makes sense.
Why though? Why?
Good question.
The reason is, in many cases, because they have some profound or minor language-related learning disability. And if you have any kind of dyslexia, you like to speak and listen more than you like to read and write. So many managers have had this experience where they say, she was fabulous on the phone. She was so great on the phone that at long last we promoted her to email. And
Hmm.
then her emails are terrible. Why? How can this be? This is a lot of times people hire me because they're saying our team members who are great on the phone are terrible in the written channel. They're not it's not professional and smooth enough. They can't carry what they did so elegantly and eloquently on the phone over to a written channel. And that's often the reason why. Well, AI is really going to help those folks.
Yeah, I wonder if some of these people wouldn't benefit from voice transcription, sort
Indeed,
of
yes.
speaking the article instead of typing it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And isn't it a great world where those tools are so accurate now, where you don't have to go in and sweep up and clean up the way you had to a few years ago?
Yeah, you can even have Gen AI do that for you, right?
Right. You could speak
Um,
it.
One of the things that you mentioned before we started recording today was the plain language movement. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you think this is an opportunity for support?
Yes, and I promise not to get weird because it's a passion, for any uh, uh, writing trainer like me, the plain language movement is kind of the name of our religion, I would say. So don't worry, but it's not going to get weird. So plain language is a communication philosophy that holds that it's the writer's responsibility to make sure that the writing is easy for the reader to understand and act on or use. And now
Mm.
we don't act on a novel and we don't act on a love letter, but the kind of writing you and I are talking about, the measure of whether we did a good job with the knowledge article, with the email, with the chat, is whether the person who called in or sought out the knowledge article can use it to do something. And so this notion that the responsibility rests on the writer. The writer is beholden to be versatile enough, flexible enough, and reader aware enough to adjust what they make so that the reader can understand or the user can understand. That's what the plain language movement holds. And plain language is an international movement. The US government put the Plain Writing Act in place in 2010 that said that many kinds of government communication had to be written in plain language. It's a movement that's kind of beaten down by its own name because plain and language are they're boring and plain is not quite what we're on about. But the philosophy remains. It's the writer's responsibility to understand how to produce something that is easy for the reader to read and that the reader can use.
And that's it's one of these things that has it's kind of deceptive in its efficacy. I think plain language doesn't sound particularly potent or powerful,
Right, right.
right? But
Hmm.
it really is. And obviously, there's people with all different kinds of reading levels. And depending on the business, you might have, much more technical readers or much less technical readers or something like that. But I feel like even if you're a PhD in whatever the subject is of this business, when you're trying to get an answer, trying to solve a problem, the plainer the language, the better.
And again, we don't want to hyper focus on the plainness of it all, like version 16.2 good. Use now. It's not simplistic. It's just that whoever is writing the information understands that the reader's perception of its ease of use is the one that matters, not my perception of the ease of use. And we talk about saving money. You asked me earlier, can we measure the harm of bad writing? Yes, we can. Can we measure the value of clear writing? Yes, totally we can. It's
Hmm.
it's not difficult to measure it. And it's not difficult to test your writing. You can have some kind of user experience lab where there's eye tracking software on the screen and we can see where you're scanning. But you can basically buy the soul of a person for the cost of pizza, and get 3 or 4 users and show them 2 versions of a knowledge article and ask them, when the knowledge articles have a summary at the top, do you look at that? And you've got 7 users, 7 out of 2,000. And if all 7 say, yeah, I do look at that, okay, you know something. Keep going, keep writing the summaries. People ask me all the time about whether screenshots are necessary. Would users rather read the steps or see the steps? Ask your users. You know,
Hmm.
even if you can't get a statistically defensible sample set, you can still get input. Or if you can't ask them, if you want a statistically defensible sample set, mock up one article with screenshots, the other one without, and keep surveying people till you have enough answers to tell you what to do. So, yes, I hope everyone will get as overstimulated and overexcited about plain language as I am, because it's a large international community with a recent ISO standard. We're not messing
Mm.
around in plain language, it's real. And so when you ask yourself, who should be doing the work here? Me, the writer, or my customer? Who should be working? It's me. I should be doing the work so my customer can do less.
Right. Right, and the AI is there as your sidekick to kind of
Indeed.
help you, right?
Right, and the AI may be even better, even better at coming up with ways to do the work. For example, in my session when you and I met, in my conference session, I was talking about personifying prompts. If you tell AI to fix an article, tell AI who it's fixing the article for, right? Name the person, and maybe the tool will offer you something that you hadn't thought of. I've seen times when we prompt, let's say we work for the Maryland Department of Motor Vehicles, a place I visited recently to have my driver's license renewed, and we're saying for a person who has moved from out of Maryland into Maryland, explain how to renew a driver's license, something like that. I've seen the AI tool offer a two-column format for that article. And, did the human writer not think about a two-column format, or is the content management system, does it object to to two-column formats for an article? But when the tool prompts you, hey, use a two-column format, that may be something that you hadn't thought of. You have to tell the tool who it's writing for, though.
Yeah, yeah, I think the context thing is always the key, right? And when you're talking to another human, there's a lot of invisible context. It's nonverbal context, right? It's just expected that, a coworker is going to understand who the customer is, so you don't have to tell them who to write for, right? But the AI typically doesn't have that context, so you have to include all the details. And you could repeat it as well, right? You don't have to like give it new details every time, but the consistent elements you can just copy and paste and then modify a piece of the prompt.
And
One,
and yeah,
yeah,
go. People's attitudes about their customers come out as they describe them to AI.
right.
You know,
That's one of the most interesting things. I have to riff on that because I find that as I get more and more into writing better prompts, it helps me to clarify my own thinking. And sometimes I'll finish writing the prompt and I don't even hit enter because I already know what I needed to get now that
Mm.
I've like clarified the question, right?
Right, right, right. And think about, back to that 600 article knowledge base. There's more than one person who's contributing content, who's evaluating whether the content should be edited, pulled down, updated. So let's say 600 article knowledge base, six people maintaining the knowledge in there. Think about sharing the prompts, conferring about the prompts before you prompt the tool to make sure, oh, would you describe our platinum level user this way? You know,
Right.
update this article for a platinum level user and focus on cost savings. Well, if you tell your colleague that's your prompt, they might say, they don't care. Platinums don't care about cost, they care about efficiency.
Hmm.
you know or they want to platinums want to delegate the task. They don't want to learn how to do this themselves. They want to pass this on to a subordinate. Can
Right.
that article be passed on to a subordinate? That all these kinds of things. But you can check the prompts from knowledge manager to knowledge manager, see whether they agree with those assumptions about the customers.
It's a really good point. Yeah, I think sharing prompts is something more teams should be doing. Seems like people are in their kind of their own little silo or their own walled garden with their own prompts that they're writing. I
Right.
know I'm guilty of that myself.
Are you proprietary? Is it like, that kid Chipper in first grade who would cheat off your spelling test?
Right, yeah, I think it does kind of feel a little bit personal, doesn't it? Like, I mean, depending on what you're prompting for, but it's sort of revealing of your own thoughts, and that could be uncomfortable for some people.
Maybe, but I can see why you'd say that. I have seen people reported to me in classes and in one-on-one writing coaching. They're really, really disappointed with what the Gen AI tool did. And I say, well,
Hmm,
what did you tell it to do? And they said
right.
something like, make this clearer, you know, and it's just too generic of a
Yeah.
suggestion. The tool can't do anything with that.
Yeah, so I feel like we've heard this again and again, the idea of the garbage in, garbage out problem with AI, and it's certainly true. But more practically speaking, like when you look at the landscape, when you look at where you see things going in the future, Like, what are the opportunities, or like, what is that future state going to look like?
Well, if you know any other writing teachers and you meet them in person, please give them a hug. We writing teachers are, we're just trying to soldier on. Because I worry a lot. I worry a lot.
Mm,
It's garbage in, and when you say garbage out means garbage presented to a person,
right.
you know,
To the frustrating
uh,
chatbot experience.
or just well that humans are to blame for that. Humans are to blame. They think that
Right.
somebody said that was acceptable. That's not acceptable. I just think of the blandification and the crapification of writing, and I do feel really, really concerned. But I do see other opportunities. We needn't ever be exposed to grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors anymore. And, I don't mind being teased about being like the comma police. That's one thing. But, a misplaced comma can cause enough confusion that a person can't complete a task. And,
Sure.
this whole spelling, punctuation, and grammar errors are a proxy measure for vigilance. Do you
Mm,
care enough? Did you clean? It's like going to your friend's house and they did not even put a fresh towel in the bathroom. It's like, did you care enough to make this nice for me? So I worry a lot that expedient writing that no human touches will have to wade through that in and we will lose writing that somebody cared about. But I hope that our gains that we'll be able to create different versions for different users, which is burdensome when humans are making the versions
mhm.
and that would be a wonderful way that a knowledge collection might even grow. Earlier I said if you have 600 articles, you're using 60, but if you wanted to create different versions for different users and you had the search capabilities that enable customers to identify who they are and find the content for them and never have to look at the content on the same topic that's for another user, that would be a wonderful outcome, you know? And if I think that, the biggest problem with stored knowledge is that it gets out of date or it grows to be slightly less useful, but we don't have the human bandwidth to clean it up in
Mm.
time. And AI really can help with that. Improving the writing doesn't always have to be a human bandwidth issue, but it is a human controlled task.
Well said. So, Leslie, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. At this point, I want to mention to our audience that Leslie does consulting and training through her business eWrite, E-Write. You can find her on LinkedIn, and all of her details will be in the description of the episode. So, Leslie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much. I loved our conversation.
Great. Well, everybody, please tune in next time, and we'll see you again on the CX Files.